My life was a grid. It was a perfectly aligned, color-coded, and meticulously organized system of my own design. I was a graphic designer, and I had bled the principles of my profession into the practice of my existence. My apartment was a testament to this philosophy. Books were arranged by spine color, mugs in the cupboard were ordered by shade from white to black, and my days were blocked out in neat, predictable rectangles of time on a digital calendar. Work, gym, meal prep, sleep. It was a fortress of solitude, and the walls were built from routine. These walls kept the chaos of the world out, but they also kept me in, alone. It was a trade-off I had accepted as necessary for peace. Then there was Liam. Liam lived in the apartment directly below mine. He was the beautiful, unpredictable variable that my system could never account for. He was a carpenter, a creator of solid, tangible things from wood and sweat, while I arranged pixels on a screen. He was everything my life was not: grounded, physical, and seemingly effortless in his connection to the world. I knew this mostly from observation, from the safe distance of my second-floor window, which looked out over the small patch of lawn in front of our building. I watched him carry groceries, all 8 bags in a single trip, his biceps straining against the fabric of his t-shirt. I watched him laugh with friends on the stoop, a deep, rumbling sound that seemed to vibrate up through the floorboards into the soles of my feet. Sometimes, on a quiet afternoon, the faint, sweet scent of freshly cut pine or the sharp tang of sawdust would drift up through my open window, and I would know he was working in the small workshop space behind our building. His scent was an invasion of my sterile, controlled air. It was an unwelcome, desperately wanted disruption. He was tall, with shoulders that seemed built to carry more than just lumber and groceries. They seemed capable of carrying the weight of the world without complaint. His hair was a dark, unruly mess that he was constantly pushing back from his forehead with a calloused hand, leaving a faint smudge of wood dust on his brow. He was, in the quiet museum of my mind, a masterpiece of rugged form and function, a sculpture to be admired from behind the velvet rope of my own crushing anxiety. The barrier between us felt as solid and insurmountable as a brick wall. It was built from 1,000 tiny assumptions I'd made. He was the guy who had friends over to watch baseball, their cheers and groans a foreign language of masculine camaraderie. I'd once heard a woman's bright, clear laughter spill from his apartment late one summer evening, a sound that had cemented my belief. He was the handsome, friendly, and devastatingly straight neighbor. To even entertain the thought of more was to play with a fire that could burn down my entire sanctuary. Rejection was one thing, but the ensuing, inescapable awkwardness in the hallways, at the mailboxes, in the laundry room, that would be unbearable. It would poison the one place on earth I felt safe. So I kept my distance. I observed. I yearned. And I reinforced the walls, brick by painful brick. My admiration was a secret, a quiet and constant hum beneath the surface of my orderly days. It lived in the small details I collected like precious artifacts. The way he'd nod a simple "mornin'" as we passed on the stairs, his voice a low, gravelly thing that sent a shiver through me every single time. The worn-in softness of his gray hoodie, the one with the paint smudge on the sleeve. The steady, unhurried rhythm of his footsteps on the floor below, a sound that became a strange sort of comfort, a reminder that I wasn't entirely alone in the building. He was a presence, a warmth that radiated upward, and I was a ghost, living silently above him, memorizing the details of a life I could never be a part of. It was a quiet ache, a bittersweet ritual of looking at something beautiful and knowing it could never be mine. The day the storm came, the grid of my life began to dissolve. It started as a whisper on the weather report, a footnote about a summer squall. By late afternoon, it had become a roar. The sky, once a placid blue, had bruised to a violent shade of purple-gray. The wind whipped the trees into a frenzy, their branches clawing at my window pane. Rain began to fall, not in drops, but in solid, wind-driven sheets that blurred the world outside into an impressionist painting of chaos. I was at my desk, trying to focus on aligning a logo, but the storm was a living thing, a primal force that demanded attention. The lights flickered once, twice, a warning shudder through the building's nervous system. Then, with a final, apologetic hum, they died. My monitor went black. The gentle whir of my computer faded into an unnerving silence. The only sounds left were the howl of the wind and the relentless drumming of rain against the glass. Darkness fell fast. I found my emergency candles, the ones I kept neatly arranged in a drawer, and began placing them around the living room. The small, dancing flames cast long, distorted shadows that made my familiar, ordered space feel strange and menacing. It was in this flickering gloom that I heard it. A frantic, heavy knocking on my door. My heart seized. No one ever knocked on my door. My packages were left downstairs. My clients were emails and video calls. The sound was an intrusion, a violation of the unspoken code of my solitude. I stood frozen for a moment, my hand hovering over a candle. The knocking came again, louder this time, more urgent. "Ethan? You in there?" It was Liam's voice. That deep, rumbling sound, now laced with an unfamiliar strain of anxiety. It cut through the noise of the storm and my own fear. I moved toward the door as if in a trance, my mind racing. What could he possibly want? Was he hurt? Was the building on fire? I fumbled with the deadbolt, my fingers clumsy and cold, and pulled the door open. He stood there, silhouetted against the dim light of the emergency fixtures in the hallway. He was soaked. Rainwater dripped from the ends of his hair and ran in rivulets down his face. His gray t-shirt was plastered to his chest, outlining the hard planes of his torso. But it was the look in his eyes that stopped my breath. He looked stressed, overwhelmed, and completely out of his depth. The confident, easygoing man I watched from my window was gone, replaced by someone vulnerable. "Hey," he said, his voice strained. "Sorry to bother you, man. Your power out too." "Yeah," I managed, my own voice sounding thin and reedy. "Just went out a few minutes ago." "Figured," he sighed, running a hand through his wet hair, sending a spray of water onto the welcome mat. "Listen, this is a really weird ask, but I've got a problem." A big 1 inch, he gestured vaguely down the stairs. "My living room window, the seal must have broken in the wind. It's pouring in. I mean, pouring. My floor is already soaked." I pictured it immediately. Water destroying his beautiful, handmade wooden furniture. The thought sent a pang of genuine distress through me. "Oh my God, Liam. That's awful." "Yeah," he repeated, looking past me into the warm, candlelit space of my apartment. He looked tired, defeated. My friends who were over for the game took off when the power went. I've put down every towel I own, but it's not stopping. I was just wondering, do you have a spare bucket? Or anything? My mind, usually so quick to find reasons to say no, to retreat, to close the door and restore the order, did something unexpected. It saw him standing there, drenched and helpless. It saw the fortress of his home being breached by the same chaos I so feared. And in a moment of reckless, terrifying empathy, a different set of words came out of my mouth. "Forget a bucket," I heard myself say, the voice sounding like it belonged to someone much braver than me. "You can't stay down there. It's going to be a mess. Why don't you just stay up here for the night? Until the storm passes and you can deal with it in the morning." The offer hung in the air between us, as tangible and electric as the lightning that suddenly flashed outside, illuminating his stunned face. For a heart-stopping second, I was sure he would laugh, or politely refuse, or look at me with suspicion. But he just blinked, the water clinging to his eyelashes, and a wave of something that looked like profound relief washed over his features. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice soft. "I don't want to impose." "It's not an imposition," I said, the lie and the truth tangled together. "It's a flood. Come in." He stepped across the threshold, and the entire atmosphere of my apartment shifted. My carefully curated space, my sanctuary of solitude, was suddenly, irrevocably occupied. He brought the storm in with him, the scent of rain and damp earth, the palpable energy of disruption. He stood dripping on my entryway rug, looking impossibly large and out of place amongst my minimalist furniture and neatly stacked books. My world, once a grid, had just been folded in half. The silence that followed was thick and awkward. He seemed hyper-aware of the water pooling at his feet, and I was hyper-aware of everything. The breadth of his shoulders, the dark fabric of his shirt clinging to his skin, the sheer, solid presence of him. It was like a statue had been delivered to my apartment, magnificent and overwhelming, and I had no idea where to put it. I can give you some dry clothes." I stammered, the words tumbling out in a rush. It was a practical thought, a lifeline in a sea of overwhelming sensory input. "You don't have to," he started, but I was already moving toward my bedroom, grateful for the task. "It's fine. You'll catch a cold," I said over my shoulder. I pulled out a soft, worn pair of sweatpants and a plain black t-shirt, clothes I lived in when I wasn't working. They were comfort items, imbued with the scent of my laundry detergent, a clean, subtle smell of lavender and cotton. I handed them to him, our fingers brushing for a fraction of a second. A jolt, small and sharp, shot up my arm. I pulled my hand back as if I'd been burned. "Thanks," he said, his eyes meeting mine for a moment in the flickering candlelight. I couldn't read his expression. I pointed toward the bathroom. "You can change in there." While he was gone, I busied myself, my movements jerky and unnatural. I relit a candle that had sputtered out. I straightened a picture frame that was already perfectly straight. I was trying to impose order on a situation that was pure chaos. My apartment, which usually smelled of my own familiar, solitary scent, was now changing. The air was thicker, charged with the smell of rain he'd brought in and an undercurrent of something else, something uniquely him. It was a warm, masculine scent, like cedarwood and clean sweat. It was everywhere. It was intoxicating. He emerged from the bathroom a few minutes later, and my breath caught in my throat. My clothes, which were loose and comfortable on my slender frame, fit him differently. The t-shirt was snug across his chest and shoulders, and the sweatpants hung low on his hips. He looked soft. The rugged carpenter had been replaced by someone quieter, more domestic. Seeing him in my clothes, in my home, felt both deeply strange and shockingly intimate. "They fit," he said, a small, almost shy smile touching his lips. "Thanks, Ethan. You're a lifesaver." "It's nothing," I mumbled, my gaze fixed on the flickering candle flame on the coffee table. I couldn't look at him for too long. It felt too dangerous. We settled into a strange, unspoken rhythm. The storm raged outside, a constant, violent soundtrack to our quiet, awkward dance. I made us sandwiches by the light of my phone's flashlight, the two of us navigating the small kitchen like strangers. Our shoulders brushed as I reached for the mustard. Our hands grazed as he took a plate from me. Each point of contact was a tiny explosion on my skin, leaving a phantom warmth in its wake. We ate sitting on opposite ends of my couch, the coffee table between us a chasm littered with candles. The darkness seemed to lower our defenses, stripping away the usual social armor. The conversation started with the practical, the storm, the leak, the likelihood of the power returning. But as the hours stretched on, it drifted into more personal territory. I learned that he had taken over his father's carpentry business after he'd passed away a few years ago. He spoke about the pressure of it, the constant worry of finding new clients and living up to his father's legacy. "Everyone sees the finished product," he said, his voice low and thoughtful as he stared into a candle flame. "The solid table, the sturdy chair. They don't see the splinters, the miscalculations, the piece of wood you have to throw out because you cut it a millimeter too short." He looked up, his eyes finding mine in the gloom. "They don't see how much of it is just hoping you don't screw it all up." It was the first crack I'd ever seen in his confident facade. The man I had mythologized as effortlessly capable was admitting to fear, to the possibility of failure. It was a revelation that humanized him in a way that felt seismic. He wasn't a statue in a museum. He was just a man, sitting in the dark, worried about letting his father down. "I get that," I found myself saying, the words surprising me with their honesty. With design, you stare at a blank screen, and it feels like this huge, empty void. And you have to fill it with something good, something that works. And most of the time, you just feel like a fraud. He nodded slowly, a real, genuine understanding in his gaze. "A fraud. Yeah, I know that feeling." We were quiet for a long time after that, but it was a different kind of silence. It wasn't awkward anymore. It was comfortable, companionable. We were two people in the dark, sharing a small, flickering circle of light, having confessed the same secret fear. The distance between us on the couch seemed to shrink, the air between us growing warmer, thicker. I was acutely aware of the sound of his breathing, a steady, rhythmic presence that anchored me in the swirling chaos of the storm and my own emotions. Eventually, the conversation died down, replaced by a comfortable quiet and the relentless sound of the storm. Yawning, Liam stretched, his arms going wide and momentarily breaching the space between us. The back of his hand brushed my arm, and this time, the touch lingered for a second too long. It wasn't an accident. It was a question. My skin tingled where he'd touched me, a warmth spreading through my entire body. I didn't pull away. "We should probably figure out sleeping," I said, my voice a little hoarse. The word sleeping felt ridiculously loaded, a euphemism for the terrifying, thrilling prospect of the night ahead. "Right?" he said, pulling his hand back slowly. "You can take the bed," I said quickly, the pre-planned, polite offer. "I'll be fine on the couch. It's comfortable enough." He looked at the couch, then at me. A slow smile spread across his face. It was a different kind of smile than the easy, friendly ones I'd seen from my window. This one was knowing, a little teasing, and it made my stomach do a slow, dizzying flip. "Or," he said, his voice dropping even lower, a soft rumble that was barely audible over the rain. "Since your bed is definitely bigger than that couch, we could share. It's just for one night." He held my gaze, his own dark and unreadable in the candlelight. "I promise I don't bite." The offer hung in the air, a tangible thing. It was a door opening into a room I had only ever dreamed of entering. All I had to do was walk through it. My carefully constructed grid, my life of straight lines and right angles, was gone. There was only this moment, this choice, this man with the kind eyes and the smile that promised a beautiful, terrifying chaos. "Okay," I whispered, the single word feeling like the biggest risk I had ever taken in my life. The bedroom was even darker than the living room, with only a single candle on the nightstand casting flickering shadows on the walls. The air was cool and smelled of clean sheets and the lingering scent of the storm. The space, my most private sanctuary, felt enormous and yet claustrophobically small with him in it. We moved with a strange, synchronized awkwardness, pulling back the comforter, fluffing the pillows, neither of us speaking. The unspoken tension was a third person in the room. We got into bed from opposite sides, the mattress dipping under his weight. We lay on our backs, a careful foot of space between us, staring up at the shadowed ceiling. The sound of the rain was softer in here, a gentle drumming on the roof. I could hear the frantic beating of my own heart, a wild, panicked bird trapped in my ribs. Beside me, I could hear Liam's breathing, slow and steady. The contrast was maddening. I was so rigid I felt like I might shatter. Every nerve ending was on high alert, cataloging the sensory data. The warmth radiating from his body across the small gap between us. The subtle scent of my own laundry detergent on him, mixed with his own distinct, musky scent. The faint sound of the cotton sheets rustling as he shifted his weight. It was too much. It was everything. Minutes stretched into an eternity. I was trapped between the desire to close the distance between us and the paralyzing fear of misreading everything. What if this was just practical for him? What if I moved and he recoiled? The anxiety was a cold knot in my stomach. I was on the verge of retreating, of mumbling an excuse and escaping to the couch, when he spoke, his voice a quiet vibration in the darkness. "You okay?" The simple question broke the spell. "Yeah," I breathed, the word coming out shaky. "Just not used to sharing my space." He was quiet for a moment. Then, I felt the mattress shift again, more decisively this time. He rolled onto his side, facing me. I could feel his gaze on me in the dark. I slowly, hesitantly, turned to face him. In the dim, flickering candlelight, his face was a landscape of shadow and light. His expression was serious, his eyes searching mine. The teasing smile was gone, replaced by a raw, open vulnerability that mirrored my own. He lifted a hand, his movements slow, deliberate, giving me every opportunity to pull away. He rested his palm against my cheek. His hand was warm and rough, the calluses on his palm a startling, grounding texture against my skin. My eyes fluttered shut at the contact. It was the first unambiguous touch, the first undeniable confirmation that this was real. A shudder went through my entire body. He leaned in closer, his breath warm against my lips. "Is this okay?" he whispered, his thumb stroking my cheekbone. I couldn't find the words, so I just nodded, a small, jerky movement. And then he kissed me. It wasn't a hard, demanding kiss. It was soft, tentative, a question. His lips were gentle against mine, a slow, patient exploration. It was a kiss that tasted of rainwater and courage. I responded instinctively, my own fear melting away, replaced by a tidal wave of yearning I had held back for so long. My hand came up to rest on his chest, my fingers curling into the soft fabric of my own t-shirt that he was wearing. I could feel the steady, solid beat of his heart beneath my palm. It was as calm and strong as he was. The kiss deepened, his other arm coming around my waist, pulling me closer until there was no space left between us at all. Our bodies flush against each other, my leg tangling with his. It felt like a homecoming. It felt like I had been cold my entire life and was only now, for the very first time, feeling true warmth. The walls I had so carefully constructed around my heart didn't just crumble. They were obliterated, washed away in a flood of pure, overwhelming sensation. My ordered life was over. The grid was a ruin. And in its place was this beautiful, terrifying, breathtaking chaos. This was Liam. I woke to the unfamiliar sensation of warmth. A heavy arm was draped over my waist, and the steady rhythm of breathing was a warm puff of air against the back of my neck. For a blissful, disoriented moment, I simply existed in the feeling of being held. The storm had passed. A pale, gray morning light filtered through the blinds, cutting sharp, unforgiving lines across the room. And with the light, reality came crashing in. My eyes snapped open. Liam. He was asleep, his face peaceful, his body curled protectively around mine. The intimacy of the image was a physical blow. The magic of the candlelit darkness had vanished, replaced by the stark, clinical light of day. And in this new light, a cold, sickening dread began to seep into my bones. What had I done? Carefully, slowly, I disentangled myself from his hold, his arm falling away with a soft thud onto the mattress. I slid out of bed, my feet hitting the cold wooden floor. The silence in the apartment was absolute. The power was still out. I crept into the living room, my borrowed t-shirt and sweatpants feeling like a costume from a play that had ended. The candles had all burned down, leaving small, hardened pools of wax on the coffee table. The room looked sad and messy in the morning light. It looked like the scene of a crime. My mind, my old, familiar, overthinking mind, kicked into high gear. The anxiety spiral began. It was the storm. It was the blackout. It was a strange, liminal night where the normal rules didn't apply. He was probably just lonely or stressed about the flood in his apartment. He'd reached for comfort, and I had been there. It didn't mean anything. It couldn't mean anything. He was the friendly, straight neighbor. I had taken advantage of his vulnerability. I had misread everything. I paced the small confines of my living room, my arms wrapped around myself as if to hold my splintering composure together. I replayed every moment of the night, but now, the memories were tainted with doubt. His gentleness now seemed like pity. His vulnerability felt like a momentary lapse in judgment. His question, "Is this okay?" now sounded like he was seeking permission for an experiment, a drunken curiosity he would surely regret in the sober light of morning. I had ruined it. I had destroyed the comfortable, safe distance. Now, every time I saw him, it would be there between us, the memory of this night. The awkwardness would be a thick, suffocating fog in the hallways. My sanctuary was no longer safe. I had burned it down for a few hours of warmth. I heard a sound from the bedroom and froze. The rustle of sheets. A soft groan. He was waking up. My heart hammered against my ribs. I couldn't face him. I didn't know what to say, how to act. I busied myself in the kitchen, pretending to look for something in a cupboard, my back to the bedroom door. He emerged a few minutes later, running a hand through his already messy hair. He wasn't looking at me. His gaze was fixed on the floor as he walked toward the living room window. He looked out at the rain-washed street, his shoulders tense. "Looks like it's over," he said, his voice flat. It was devoid of the warmth from the night before. To my panicked mind, it sounded cold, distant. "Yeah," I replied, my voice tight. I didn't turn around. "Power's still out, though. I should go down and check the damage," he said. He started gathering his damp clothes from the floor where he'd left them. His movements were efficient, purposeful. He was erasing his presence from my apartment, from my life. Each action was a confirmation of my deepest fears. He wanted to escape. He changed back into his own clothes in the bathroom without a word. When he came out, he had his boots in his hand. The physical distance between us and my small apartment felt like miles. The air was thick with unspoken words, with the ghost of our intimacy. It was 1,000 times more awkward than I had ever imagined. Well, he said, stopping at the door. He still wouldn't look at me directly. Thanks again for everything. The dry clothes. The place to crash. He omitted the most important part. He omitted the kiss. He omitted the feeling of his body pressed against mine. The omission was a gaping wound. This was it. The moment where we both pretended it never happened. The moment where we reset our relationship back to neighbors. Only now it would be strained and hollow. My chest ached with a profound, crushing disappointment. He put his hand on the doorknob. I'll, see you around, Ethan. He was about to leave. He was going to walk out that door, and we would never speak of it again. The thought was so unbearable that it propelled me to speak. Liam, wait. He stopped, his hand still on the knob, his back to me. He didn't turn around. He let out a long, slow breath. And then he said the words I was dreading most. Ethan, we should probably talk about last night. My stomach plummeted. Here it came. The letdown. The I'm not gay speech. The let's just be friends line that would feel like a judgment. I braced myself, my hands clenching into fists at my sides. Okay, I said, my voice barely a whisper. He turned around then, slowly. He leaned back against the closed door, crossing his arms over his chest. He looked tired, and for the first time, I saw that the emotion on his face wasn't coldness or regret. It was nervousness. He looked just as scared as I felt. I'm not good at this, he started, his gaze finally meeting mine. It was direct and intense, and it made me feel completely exposed. I don't really do talking about feelings. I build things. It's easier. He took a deep breath. Last night, that wasn't the storm, or the power outage, or a mistake. Each word was delivered with a careful, deliberate weight. I've wanted to kiss you for 6 months. The world stopped. The air left my lungs in a silent rush. I could only stare at him, my mind unable to process the words. 6 months. I've seen you, he continued, a faint flush creeping up his neck. Watching me from your window. I pretended not to notice, but I did. I liked it. He gave a small, self-deprecating laugh. I started carrying all the groceries in at once on purpose, you know. I figured it made me look strong or something stupid like that. A disbelieving laugh bubbled up in my own chest. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated shock. And the woman you heard laughing in my apartment that one time? That was my sister. She was telling me I was an idiot for not just coming up here and talking to you. He confessed. She said the worst you could do was say no. But I was scared. I've never done this before. With a guy. But I knew how I felt when I looked at you. And it was making me crazy. He pushed himself off the door and took a hesitant step toward me. The game last night, it was just an excuse. I invited one friend over, hoping I'd run into you. Hoping I could work up the nerve to say something. Then the storm hit, and my window broke, and it felt like some kind of sign. A stupid, messy, dramatic sign. He was standing in front of me now, so close I could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. So when I kissed you, Ethan, I meant it. And when I woke up this morning, I panicked. Because it felt too good. Too real. And I thought maybe you regretted it. I thought maybe for you it was just the storm. The dam inside me broke. All the anxiety, the fear, the crushing weight of my own assumptions, it all washed away in a tidal wave of relief, so profound it brought tears to my eyes. I thought you were straight. I whispered, the words thick with emotion. I watched you because I thought that was the only way I could ever have you. From a distance. I thought last night was a mistake, that I'd ruined everything. I've been standing here for an hour absolutely terrified. A slow, beautiful smile spread across his face. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated relief. It was the sun coming out after the storm. So you're not regretting it? No, I said, my voice gaining strength. God, no. Liam, it was the best thing that's ever happened in this apartment. He closed the small distance between us, his hands coming up to cup my face, just as he had done the night before. His thumbs gently wiped away the tears I hadn't even realized were falling. Good, he murmured, his forehead resting against mine. That's good to hear. And he kissed me again. This kiss was different. It wasn't the tentative, questioning kiss from the night before. This one was sure. It was deep and certain, filled with all the words we had finally said, and all the relief and hope that came with them. It was a kiss that wasn't about the chaos of a storm, but about the calm, steady promise of a new morning. It tasted like coffee and sawdust and a future I had never, ever allowed myself to believe was possible. It felt like coming home. Our new beginning was quiet. It was built in the small moments that followed the confession. It was Liam going downstairs to deal with his flooded apartment, but this time, I went with him. I handed him towels and held a flashlight while he assessed the damage to the window frame. I was in his space, and it felt as natural as breathing. The days that followed fell into a new rhythm, a new grid. This one wasn't about solitude and control, it was about connection. It started with coffee. He'd text me when he woke up, "Coffee." And I'd come down to his apartment, which always smelled of wood and fresh coffee grounds. We'd sit in his kitchen, surrounded by his beautiful, handmade furniture, and talk until he had to leave for his workshop. He started showing me his world. He took me to his workshop, a large, dusty space that was a cathedral of creation. He taught me the difference between oak and maple, not by sight, but by scent and touch. He'd place a piece of wood in my hands and tell me to close my eyes, to feel the grain, to smell its story. I showed him my world, the glowing, orderly universe inside my computer. He'd pull up a stool and watch, fascinated, as I manipulated shapes and colors, building something from nothing but light and code. He said he finally understood what I did all day. The intimacy between us deepened with every shared meal, every quiet evening spent on my couch, the same couch where we'd sat as strangers in a storm. Now, there was no space between us. His arm would be around me, my head resting on his solid shoulder. The physical affection was constant and easy, a language we were both fluent in. A hand on the small of my back as I passed him in the kitchen. A quick, stolen kiss in the hallway between our apartments. His fingers lacing through mine as we watched a movie. Each touch was a quiet reassurance. This is real. You are not alone. One evening, about a month later, another storm rolled in. It wasn't as violent as the first one, just a steady, gentle rain that pattered against the windows. We were in my apartment, curled up on the couch, watching some mindless show on TV. The lights flickered. My body tensed instinctively, a ghost of the old panic. Liam must have felt it, because he tightened his arm around me. "Hey," he said softly, his lips against my hair. "It's okay. The power's not going out." I relaxed into his hold, a small smile on my face. "Good," I said. "I don't think your living room floor could handle another flood." He chuckled, a low, warm rumble against my ear. He pulled back just enough to look at me, his eyes full of a fond, teasing light. "Nah, I fixed that seal. It's solid now." He paused, his expression turning more serious, more tender. "But I'm kind of grateful for that stupid leak." "Me too," I whispered. That storm, the one I had feared for the chaos it would bring, hadn't destroyed my life. It had dismantled it, piece by piece, washing away the foundations of my fear and my solitude. It had broken down the walls I had built to keep the world out, but in doing so, it had let him in. I had spent years curating a life of perfect, sterile order, believing it was the only way to find peace. I was wrong. The chaos I had dreaded, the unpredictable variable, the beautiful disruption, it wasn't a threat. It was a gift. It was the steady presence of the man beside me, his heartbeat a quiet, constant rhythm against my back. It was the realization that the safest place in the world wasn't a fortress of my own making, but the warm, grounding space in his arms.